You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and tonight we are going to be talking about episode 8 of The Skeleton Crew, The Real Good Guys, the finale of an incredible series that we've really been all in favor of, quite honestly. We're going to talk about some of this here in just a few minutes, but joining me tonight, of course, is one of the real good guys, Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you?
I'm great, man. I'm super stoked. I mean, honestly, as soon as this episode was over, I went back and watched it immediately again, which I don't typically do, and did no notes. I just wanted to watch it again. And then I stayed up and did all the show notes last night, which I usually don't do. I was up till like 2 a.m. getting everything ready because I was just so excited. I mean, I really, really enjoyed the finale. And I know I don't think I'm in the smaller group of people like that, in the minority, if you will, but I definitely really enjoyed this final episode. But I guess how are you overall?
I'm doing great. I agree with you. I think this was a really fun episode. I think it delivered the things that we needed to do. Like it's easy to compare it to Acolyte because that was the most recent content we had. We looked at kind of the questions were left there in the story that it wrapped up.
Yeah.
And you kind of compare it to the story that wrapped up here and the questions that were open-ended. This one felt a little more natural, right? It felt like it kind of closed out this part of the story while letting us kind of wonder and speculate on the others, but they weren't necessarily key in the exact moment, right? Especially if we look at the core characters and what mattered most to what was going on. And I think from that, I mean, we had a very satisfying ending, I think it was just in general, which is kind of rare a little bit. Like sometimes we get these and we feel pretty good about it, but this one just felt solid, like all the way through. We were talking before we came on air. Maybe there was one episode that was maybe a little on the weaker side compared to the others, the kind of the strength of the others. But man, you talk about a really solid, all ages type of material, which I think is really important to remember. It's not for kids. It's not just for adults, but this is kind of an all ages family type of show, which is something we've been clamoring for, something we've said, yeah, could we give it like a more of a family oriented show that everybody can kind of sit around. We don't have to worry about the violence or whatever it might be. This one kind of delivered on all fronts. And you have to suspend belief a lot of times. And something's moving a little quicker than maybe we would anticipate or we'd kind of want. But when you look at it from like that blend of what do you need for a younger audience with what's entertaining to us, I thought it really did well and delivered on all the things it needed to do.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. We're going to talk about that. I've got some of those same sentiments once we get to our opening thoughts. Before we get into that, we are joined and supported by other real good guys. And I know you're going to say thank you just now.
Yeah, amazing guys and gals over on the Patreon site. Now part of the tribe members, Alex, Raphael, Danny, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Jackson, Shark Brandan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, Reader Reborn. Of course, our Delusions of Grandeur members are our top tier. Now this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Rob. CantinaCast.com/Patreon if you would like to check those out, support the show. Everything you put into the show or everything you put into us goes right back into the show. And I think you have a topic for this weekend.
Yeah. Before I get to that, just if you're a Patreon member, even if you're on just part of the Patreon group and on the free membership, I did I used AI to kind of, what's that?
Yeah, the upscaling.
Yeah, I did some upscaling on some of the images at the very end on Wim's data pad. So those are actually really neat. I loved them. I've actually used them for my wallpapers and stuff, but they're out there if you want to download all. I think there's like 12 of them total. So that's free. But yeah, this weekend, this Sunday, we're going to be doing, I don't know what we're going to call the show yet, but it's kind of like a what happens next, right? So throughout this episode tonight, we're certainly going to be talking about potentially future strings that are left untethered and where things could potentially go. But we are going to spend the majority of this week's Patreon show talking about where the series is going to go, what's next for these characters. And then we're actually going to go back and talk about some of the loose ends that never got tied up. Some of these are kind of trivial now, and they weren't probably in service to the main story. But it'd be just kind of a fun idea I thought it'd be a fun idea to just kind of wrap up everything, because we've been going on and on every almost Patreon show talking about like everything that's been unanswered and are we going to get answers and what does that look like? So it'll be fun to kind of really put a cap on that, if you will. So that'll be Sunday 9 p.m. exclusive to Patreon members.
Inspiration just hit me, Albert, about what the title should be.
Okay.
Is Jod still an a-hole?
Oh, yeah. To play on last week's Patreon show.
We're building here. This is incremental.
Yeah.
This is incremental, man. This is how we do things. We build on it. Hey, real quick, a huge thanks to the folks who've come out and in the live stream as well. If you're listening to this, thank you so much for the download. KTTcast.com/YouTube. You could be like one of these amazing people. Steph, Music Train, Sky, Alex, What Up versus CPU, Matthew, Gary Smith. If I've missed anybody, we'll get you back on the back side. If you're in the background, we see you lingering. Come and give us a hello. Let us know what your favorite moments were. If you have a question, if you have a comment as we go through the show, we'll try to get those up on the screen and call those out as we can. Yeah, thanks for being here. KTTcast.com/YouTube.
Yep. And we also have one poster left. This is the final poster that we're going to give away for the breakdowns, at least. This is a Skeleton Crew poster. Again, it's got Mufasa if you want that instead. But it does have Skeleton Crew. So these are official Fandango, Disney Plus movie posters. We've already picked not movie posters, but promo posters. We've already picked the winner. So we've got a number of questions at the end of the show. We'll get to some answers on that, and then we'll announce the winner at the very end. So you don't need to be present to win. But stick around. Should be a lot of fun to talk about those.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone who's put questions in Discord, Patreon, Instagram, Facebook, emails. We've had more emails we've had in the last handful of weeks than we've had in a long time. So it's really great to hear from y'all. We enjoy interacting with you. YouTube as well. Apologize if we've not been as responsive, but we have been trying to capture these so we can bring them onto the show, make sure you have a chance to win. But thanks for the interaction. We really do appreciate that. So many of you had some really kind words for us as well. So that's always lovely to hear. Thank you. You guys make this all worthwhile. And knowing that you guys are enjoying what we're doing and you guys feed us too. So this is fantastic. So thank y'all so much. We really do appreciate that.
Yeah, very humbling too. So okay, so let me start with my opening thoughts. I'm going to piggyback on something you were talking about here at the tail end of your intro. Mm-hmm. And that's really that we did get a lot of questions that were answered. And again, a lot of them were in service to the characters themselves, maybe in service to kind of the main storyline, not necessarily some of the ancillary stuff that we were learning about, some of that stuff that I would consider trivial now at this point. For example, or let me say this, or if we didn't get answers, it was because we as a fandom made way more big of a deal than they really should be.
We don't do that.
I know we don't. It's very rare that we do this. But Wim's mother, my whole, and I'm going to blame my brother because it's partly his fault. But this whole story, it is his fault. But this whole story about Wim's mom being alive and a conspiracy theory there, or maybe living in the mines, maybe it still is true. No, but that's stuff that we made up, right? And so I'm seeing a lot of feedback now for people that are there. It's almost like they're too scared, or they're too I don't know what's so proudful, or I don't know.
Prideful,
yeah.
Too much pride. Yeah.
Too much pride to just say, yeah, I enjoyed the show, or it was a good show, or I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun, right? And so they're kind of taking the safer route and saying, oh yeah, I'm glad it's over, or yeah, let's move on to Andor, that kind of thing. But all in all, there was some really good stuff. I felt like this episode, honestly, just to focus on the episode, was really the most Amblin of all of the episodes. Yeah. Like beginning to end, that energy was just there. So much of what we were seeing, for me, I feel like was very predictable. And I don't mean that in a negative way whatsoever. Like there are certain things, and we talked about this going into the series. We talked about it throughout the breakdowns.
It's all execution.
It's about execution. Yeah. It's about playing to some of the strengths of that Amblin era. And we saw that in, the way some of the characters reacted, some of the events, some of everything from even the technical aspects, whether it's choreography, but, the shots or, the music, the cues, all of that stuff felt very, very Amblin-like. And I felt like this one just had it in spades, every single beat throughout the entire thing. I think this episode, honestly, I cheered more for than I have for anything Star Wars in a long time. And I mean, like, there were 10 moments where I either physically I had some kind of physical reaction, or I was cheering or fist pumping in some way. And I don't usually get that excited about something unless like I'm in a movie theater, right? Watching Star Wars, that tends to happen. But at home on the couch, there was 10 moments. And I'm going to go through all of them just really quick. So when Wendell rides with his kids on the bikes, that was a moment. Making the jump over the chasm was an exciting moment. When SM-33 showed up, it was live. We all knew that was coming. Still, it was a moment. I really enjoyed that. The turbo laser, right, going off. We knew that was coming. Still enjoyed that. When Kim showed up on the holo, when KB called her, when Window punched Jod, that was like through the roof on that one. And I'll get to that here in a little bit. The whining of those X-Wings, when you hear them first coming in and you kind of see that shot and they're all coming right at the camera, that little squadron there, that was absolutely perfect. Loved that. When the B-Wings fired, well, actually, when they came in, there was one audible squelch. And then when they fired,
yeah, we got the Rebels lasers. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was just like, I hadn't seen that in a long, long time. So super excited about that. And then just when they were firing on the frigate and the whole thing was kind of blowing up and going up in pieces and stuff. So it's just, it was, and a lot of that is a lot of fun. Again, a lot of it was predictable. A lot of the stuff we saw was coming, but it still got me, right? I still was caught up in the emotion of it all, that I really enjoyed it. But I think it was a great ending to a great finale to an already amazing series. There were some other great moments in there, like the Wizard of Oz moment. That was we've been talking about that. It did feel like Wizard of Oz as of, very early on when they were talking about this mysterious supervisor.
Still a lot of questions with all of that too. Yeah.
Still have questions there. And we'll probably touch on some of those tonight. Definitely want to hit those in the Patreon show. And then honestly, the biggest one, maybe not the biggest one, but another really great one for me was just seeing Wim actually hold that lightsaber. We talked about whether or not he would have his kind of lightsaber redemption moment since he had it upside down.
I like how he actually looked to make sure he was holding it the right way.
But I mean, he had his heroic moment, and he's already had heroic moments. And I don't think that's lost, right? That the lesson of you don't have to have a weapon. You don't necessarily need to be a Jedi to be a hero and to make a difference. That's not lost on him, and that's not lost on us as viewers. But it felt appropriate. It felt right to give him that moment where he was able to ignite his lightsaber, even if he didn't do anything with it. The fact that he was standing there and that look on his face, standing next to Fern, who, those two were at odds almost the entire series. That was a really great shot, a really great moment, and I really enjoyed it. So those are all my opening thoughts. Again, we're going to talk about all this in more detail, but anything you want to add to what you've already said?
I'll just do maybe two just brief moments. I think one, we had talked about all the kids are going to have their moment, right?
Yep.
And each one excelled in what they needed to do in these moments, especially when it came to talking with their parents. And I think that's my second point was, it was nice to see like Wendell and Farrah kind of have a moment too, and have a little bit of a growth and start to reconnect with their kids. I won't say have their, confidence or whatever word I'm looking for, but that they had that faith in their kids. And I think it was really cool. I was not really a huge fan of Wendell. He was a very dry character, but we had a feeling that there was something adventurous in his past, that maybe he just left all that behind and just adopted what he needed to, and to see him finally come out of that shell, like you said, when he made the jump over the chasm, he got real excited. He's like, woo, and whatever. And then I got to tell you though, the moment when he got to tell Wim, like, I'm a level 7 systems coordinator, like the pride, and Wim's like, wow, like my dad's got the coolest job ever type of thing. I just laughed. The second time I watched it, I actually laughed out loud. I was just like, man, it's just really, the moment was just really well captured. And I think those are the things you take away from it, and seeing the kids have their moment, having a couple of the adults finally kind of have a moment too, especially Wendell knocking out Jod. You had kind of said that, and I think some of our viewers said the same thing. They wanted, Noel to do it, but it seemed very appropriate for Wendell to do it. The other parents didn't get as much screen time this time around. They were there and kind of had their words here and there, but it was cool that we at least got to see some of them do something. And it made sense that it was Wendell and Farrah because they were kind of the central characters. But yeah, so we'll walk through the rest of the episode, but those just kind of general topics. Those are the two that really, kind of stuck with me throughout it, that we wanted to see and that we definitely got.
Yeah. And this, let's get into the breakdown. It opens up, we left it with the lightsaber being ignited, and that was very ominous, thinking, something horrible could possibly go wrong or happen. And turns out not to be the case, which again, it's a kid's show. We talked about, it's very likely that won't happen, but you never knew with this character, especially since he was kind of going down the path of the dark side.
It didn't really quite make sense to me why he did this though. Aside from like the kind of the cliffhanger from the last episode, that was about the only effect it had. Otherwise, he's just holding it.
I think it was for the flash, the pomps of it all, right? To say, look, I'm an emissary and I'm a Jedi. That's not what a Jedi would do, of course. And now that we know more about his background, you could argue that, that was probably never taught to him. I'm sure she never ignited her lightsaber in public, but for him in that moment, I mean, I guess maybe that's where he was thinking is like, okay, I got to seem flashy. I got to seem like, seem like I'm very powerful and therefore I'm going to ignite this lightsaber. But us as a viewer and as the writing, it was really just to kind of leave us with that cliffhanger, wonder, is he going to use it?
Yeah, I mean, and Dante put in the chat too. Just as a quick reminder to the kids to be quiet, obey, fall into step, don't do anything, otherwise I won't make good on my promise.
Yeah, yeah. It was a remind the kids to keep quiet.
But if I was a parent seeing it, I'm like, what is this guy doing? Like, why are you showing me your lightsaber? You're just going to put it away. But yeah. Anyway.
But yeah, he introduces himself, says the kids are in a lot of trouble for what they've done. They stole the ship. They broke all the security protocols. This is all playing into Farah's, right? At least where Farah is at the very beginning of this episode of like, wow, we're really in a lot of trouble. They're in a lot of trouble. And she's like, I take full responsibility for it all. Right. He orders the kids to be confined and to their homes, except he does bring Fern and Farah with him because he talks about duty and responsibility, and he wants to take them to see the supervisor, which I think is, more than anything, was really a way to keep one of them around in case things go south. He has that kind of bargaining chip there.
Well, I think with Fern, who's the one maybe most likely to actually be a credible threat to come up with something?
Yeah.
I think it would likely be Fern, right? I mean, you could say Wim's more reckless, right? So he might try something, but the likelihood of success is pretty low. And I think Fern's the one giving him all these really nasty dagger-eyed looks the entire time. And I mean, she's just so defiant throughout the entire episode, right? So I think of any of the kids that he would be concerned about that would find a way around all the rules and figure out a way to thwart him, keep that one closest by so we can keep an eye on her. So I think that made a lot of sense for him to keep her with him.
Yeah, and I think that's right on the heels too of when she said we're way too troublesome, right? And she was kind of like giving the dagger eyes, like you mentioned earlier. So we flip back over to dinner time with Wendell and Wim. Dad's going on already about the assessment, which is not what Wim wants to hear.
Their microwave dinner is a home cooked meal.
Yeah, that's right. They're being watched by these droids. And he gets out the words, he's not even a jet, and he stops and realizes, okay, he can't really say much because the droids are there. But I like the fact that these kids, in a couple of different ways, right? They were very conscious and aware of what they come from and what they actually had. And we kind of saw that happen and develop when they were really missing home and wanting to go back and that sort of thing. But it was nice to hear them vocally say that, right? Wim says that, he does appreciate everything that this home and what he has here compared to what he's already seen in the galaxy. But there are certain people out there that are out to ruin it all, right? And that cuts over, of course, into what you would expect Wendell to say. Well, that's what the supervisor is for, right? That's what the barrier is for. And this is why we have to maintain our secrecy, because it does keep everybody safe. And we hear that echoed again a little bit later from Farah. So I like to see that, they were still consistent with that. Wim decides he's going to call Neil, says they need to save Fern. And then right when, the droid hears him, he walks in, we get the Spaceballs scene where Wim starts playing with his action figures, trying to cover for the fact that he was just talking to Neil on that. But this is so very much like, very Amblin-ish, a more modern term would maybe Stranger Things, right? Where the kids are talking back and forth and planning, and they're always coming up with plans, and they're about to go on yet another adventure here.
Right. Yeah. And of course, Neil's back in the bathtub, which was just funny. And so, but yeah,
I mean, the guy is very dirty, right? The first thing he had to get home, take a bath.
Well, I mean, they haven't had a shower in a week or so. So, I mean, it makes sense, right?
Sure.
So,
yeah.
But it was interesting. He called her Princess Fern. Like, I just thought that was amusing.
Mm-hmm. So they're on their way to meet the supervisor. Of course, mom tells her not to slouch. She almost says something to her mother and doesn't get that out. They go into the quarters.
Did John give her a bit of a sympathetic look? Did you think, like, when he glanced over her, that really quick exchange, like, wow, your mom's pretty overbearing. Like,
I didn't catch that. I have to go back and look.
Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but he glanced over, and like Jude Law has these very subtle reactions, right? So sometimes it's hard to tell if it's intentional or if it just kind of came out naturally. But it almost seemed like there was a little bit of like a twinge of like, oof, that hurt.
I mean, before this episode premiered, I would say no. There's probably no chance he would have done that, but. He had a few moments in this episode where he did show, he was wearing his heart on his sleeve, and you got to see the barrier, no pun intended, come down on him. So, maybe. I need to go back and watch that again. I didn't catch that if that certainly was the case, but I wouldn't put it past them. They head into the supervisor's quarters, and again, a lot of this stuff we were kind of predicting and talking about already, but it did look like it had been abandoned. No one had been there in forever. I had maybe thought Fern or Farah had seen him or been reporting to him as the undersecretary, but that doesn't look like it's happened either. It looks like that's just been a relationship that's all through email or text or whatever it is. Doesn't sound like she's ever met with him. And it turns out to be a droid. Shades of HAL 9000 from 2001, definitely there. I enjoyed the fact that it was a droid like we suspected, just because I didn't feel like anybody would have lived that long. Now, that said, not tonight, but in the Patreon episode, I do want to talk about, was that the supervisor always a droid, right? What did the statue mean on At Attin when they had that up? We assumed that was erected for whoever the acting supervisor was on At Attin. Maybe that wasn't the case. So we can explore that a little bit later, but I did like the fact that it was just a droid. And furthermore, when he sees Farah, he recognizes her and says, I've been watching you with, quote, great interest. And I'm like, hey, look, it's a Palpatine reference right out of, episode 1 all over again. But he did know that
it is the Emperor.
Yeah, exactly. That's the closest we got to him being the Emperor. But he also knew that Fern was lost and now returned. So he was up to speed on not only the current events of the planet, but then later on we find out that he's well aware that, well, at least as of Order 66, he was still in communication with what was going on. And that begs all kinds of questions.
He received information from somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some debate there about what that might have looked like, but yeah, that's interesting.
But anything you want to add on to that before we get into Jod and his little intro?
No, I think let's continue.
Yeah, so Jod then introduces himself, of course, as an emissary and a Jedi Knight, which is where he faltered. Love the fact that they did that. He uses the Force, again, more flashy, showing off, similar to igniting the lightsaber like we talked about. Supervisor mentions that the galaxy is dangerously unstable right now, unstable with everything that's going on. And then Farah asks, why? Yeah, this is where Farah's starting to realize, okay, something's not right here. I mean, she's already picking up vibes from her daughter. But she asked, like, why do you need your other ship, right? Why, you're the emissary. Why couldn't you just fly down there? Right. Cuts her off by saying you asked too many questions. That's a huge red flag. And then he goes on to say, look, you guys are ruled by authority. I think it's the supervisor that says that, right? Like, hey, we need to be more.
Well, Jod says you need to obey, and the supervisor, you're quite right. But riddle me this, Batman. The one quick question, and that's where he calls him out on his BS story.
Yeah, about whether he's lying about being an emissary or being a Jedi, and which that's when Fern just tells him that he's lying, that he's trying to invade the Mint. Now, I was not, I guess, expecting the droids to. I thought the droids would have just come all out. I'm surprised they paused, and I get why they did, because it wouldn't be much of a story if they just kept opening fire. But I was surprised too to see him be able to deflect those stun blaster bolts, right? Like that was another immediately. I mean, of course we know now, I haven't seen the whole episode, but at that moment I'm like, okay, wait a minute. This whole thing about whether he's just force sensitive and never had any training, that was out the door. Like, it was clear that he had training in that moment, because there's no way you would have been able to deflect 2 of those bolts in the speed with the accuracy that he did had he not gotten training. Yeah,
we had talked about this. It may have been on the Patreon episode or one of the previous shows, but yeah, if we knew this was going to be the make or break point, if he had to deflect a blaster of any way, either a stun bolt or whatever it had to have been, we knew that takes a certain amount of skill. Now, he is clunky with his lightsaber moves, right? And we've seen this a couple of times, even when he beheaded 33, the moves were kind of there, but they weren't real refined. And so I think we see that here. He's able to do it, but he's got very big motions. They're not very efficient, not very Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon-ish, right? And Phantom Menace when they're trying to, get off the ship and do some of this stuff. But yeah, it basically just confirmed it like right away before we even get the dialogue later on the episode that, yeah, he has had some training without a doubt, because these are not normal skills. Now, just having the Force, you do have a certain amount of, I guess you would call it premonition of some sort. You can sense what's happening. So if you're in tune with it, but again, those chaotic moments just tells me that he's kind of working off of raw instinct in many ways, and a little bit of muscle memory in some ways.
Yeah. That's at that point he takes the lightsaber, he stabs it into the eye of the supervisor. His little second Qui-Gon Jinn moment there, which is kind of holding it in. I was hoping they were going to see that thing starting to melt, you know, in terms of like metal slag, but
Well, you kind of see it at the very end. There's a little bit of slag when he pulls a lightsaber out, but it was a little overdone with the sparks. But we got the point. Yeah,
we got the point.
Hal did not survive.
No, he's dead.
I liked all the arms that were kind of coming out of it, though. You could see that the supervisor had all sorts of other little grabby things all around the dome.
Yeah,
that were all jutting out, like kind of spasming and trying to reach out to do something, but nothing.
Yeah, great design. I can't wait to see more of the art of, right? Hopefully they do a book or something like that. It'd be fun if they did, but that's where you see that stuff.
Yeah, I really hope they would too, because we usually get some sort of concept art at some point, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and whether it's online or they actually formally put into a book of sorts, to be determined, but I'm definitely down for that. Okay, so the power that takes out all the power, of course, typical Star Wars, take out the core, all the other droids and drones, they all fall down. They're out of power now. Farrah says this is where they get into the whole barrier discussion. And he's willing to take it down at that moment. And she's like, no, don't take it down, because she's more concerned about the safety of her planet and of the kids. And so she does not want this to destroy it. And of course, this becomes a crucial and pivotal moment at the very end of it all, because she ultimately is the one that pulls it. But she offers to give him access, she has the privileges, she has the rights, so she can give them codes to kind of fly down the frigate. And he says, he goes in this thing like, oh, I don't really want to destroy anything. I just want to take my credits. No one's going to get hurt. And when he's saying all that, this is what we talked about in the last episode. I'm like, I really want to believe that's really what he would have done. But then at the same time, I can't, because, he's burned too many bridges already. But did you believe him at all?
No, not at all. I was like, there's just no way he's coming and doing this, because he's settling in for the long haul. And they'd kind of tipped some of that off a couple of different times already, at least in very, very subtle ways. But so not surprised that they were going to set up camp and truly invade. Yeah.
And of course, this is when he gets a little more feral, ignites a lightsaber, threatens Fern, and Farrah, of course, then decides that she goes ahead and she clears the frigate to come down. This is where things really started to pick up, because from here on out, I mean, once the pirates start exiting the ship, I mean, it's like, heavy metal storytelling at that point. So Jod then jumps on to the holo, tells Gunter that the barrier is clear, the frigate heads in. The visuals of that, right? Them kind of just the way the camera work was moving and getting to see the visuals of the red turning to green and being cleared, all that stuff was just really a lot of fun. They come down, and this is where Wendell is like, oh, like this is the most suburban dad thing ever. He goes over to the window and it's like, wow, looks like the whole block's out, right? Like it's not even.
It was, yeah.
Oh my God, I forgot to put the trash cans out tonight. It was just like a slice of my own life right there. But this is where Wim tells him, he knocks over the droid and tells him that Jod's a bad guy and that he's really after them. The frigate flies in over the neighborhood. Probably didn't have to be in the neighborhood, but that is the best place for that thing to go to give us the story that we really want, which is, everybody kind of running for their lives. It was very War of the Worlds in a lot of ways too.
It was, yeah.
The way it was coming down and everybody was looking up and, scared. And, this is where, of course, you mentioned Neil was taking a bath, again, we got the Noel appearance cameo at this point, because we hadn't seen him until now, although they had already released pictures of him and that sort of thing. But I was talking to my brother earlier today about where Noel was, and we just chalked it up to like, man, Noel's probably just, he's probably digging ditches. He's not working on, he's just a hard white collared worker or blue collar worker. And he's popping the St. Pauli girls when he comes home. And so, that's why he hasn't been around. The guy works 40 hours, 50 hours a week.
He's in his man cave in the garage. Yeah. He's got to have his me time.
It's got to be the explanation. But, this kid's almost got shot.
Heaven help him if he's watching like the holiday special stuff though.
That's probably all he's got to watch.
That's terrible.
So KB then sees the frigate land, and of course she runs inside. It starts opening fire on everything, which is a little shocking that they would just start shooting stuff. But, they're pirates and they're going to pillage and take what they want. And so, yeah, some of that was probably just to for fear effect, right? To keep the locals in line, to coin a phrase.
Yeah, they don't know they don't really know what the plan is quite yet, right? Jod still has to kind of spell it out for them, because even when they start making examples of them later, he's like, whoa, wait, that's not really the plan. to just take it. This also reminded me of like the Pirates of the Caribbean where they storm, what is it, Tortuga or something like that. The pirate town where they kind of come up on it and start bombarding it. It kind of reminded me of that too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, they come in, they just start shooting everything. But again, it raises the stakes. It shows us that, it's not just coming in to do a smash and grab. It's like, no, we're going to settle in, we're going to instill fear, and we're really effectively going to enslave the population to do what we want them to do.
And Wendell, like his immediate reaction was to, we got to get out of here. He has no interest in going to save anybody but him and his kid, which I can totally relate to, right? Family first kind of thing. But yeah, we got a great moment from Wim saying, no, we got to go save her. He wants to save Fern. At that moment, that's when they run outside. Neil and KB show up in their hover bikes. And they basically say, look, we need to call, they come up with a plan that they need to call Kim and the X-Wing pilots. When Wim actually says, let's do this, which was like the most, everybody says that these days, especially the kids. Enjoyed that. I posted on social media today that in that moment, and especially towards the very end, when he kind of looks up in that last scene where he's looking up through the hole and he sees the X-Wings, followed by the blockade runner. I think he even sees the 2 B-Wings that fly by as well. But in that moment, this did feel like, I think I said, this feels to Wim as A New Hope did to Luke Skywalker, in that we're likely, this is just pure conjecture and speculation on my part, but it feels like we were being set up for Wim to kind of be this hero of the New Republic, similar to, with Luke being a farm boy on Tatooine that went on to be a hero. This is just another version that, only instead of a farm boy, it's a suburban kid, which I think I'm absolutely totally fine with. I do have questions about why we still have the suburbia kind of environment, but we'll tackle that on the Patreon show. But
kind of reminded me of Broom Boy too.
Yeah, similar to Broom Boy as well. Heroes come from all over the galaxy, but my goodness, again, when he ran out to when Wendell runs out and he sees Bonj Falfa there on his bike and runs into him, I was like, holy crap. I posted this too on social media. That is right out of the Goonies, by the way. There's a scene in there where the older brother runs out and all the kids take off on bikes and he doesn't have one. And so he runs out and there's a little girl there and he takes the bike, runs off, and then we get these funny moments of him riding a kid's bike. But that was right out of the Goonies, 100% as well. Yep. Man, let me just, the hover bike chase, I know we've already talked about it because I was talking about my, moments of testosterone. I really enjoyed everything about that. The way it was filmed, the editing of it all, it was very sharp, very snappy.
Yeah, it was.
Very immersive in a lot of ways too. But there's a lot of action that's going on here. But I don't know if you want to just kind of touch on some of the moments here, things that you really enjoyed about that whole speeder bike chase leading up until them going into the school when they did. And I thought, okay, well, here's the jumping off point for Neil. It has to be, if he's going to fire the gun, the big turbo laser, this is going to have to to be that moment.
Yeah, I knew as soon as that hit, I was like, man, I imagine Albert's this is telegraphing what it is for him. And we'll talk about that here in a second because I liked his little move when he got knocked off the bike too. But I'm with you. I think the way they shot this was really well done. I mean, when you get the quick cuts, you do have like them coming into the scene, the use of the lights in the dark too, was just really nice. I mean, it was a little bit of a lengthier sequence than I anticipated, but the way that they shot it, the way that they cut it, kept it exciting. It kept it moving. And again, when they jump the gap and they're trusting KB, right? You get the sense of the kids. Stuff. Yeah, the kids leaning on one another and getting Wendell to believe too when he's like, I'm too heavy, I can't do this, and he does it and he's super
just
excited.
Trust KB is what he says.
Exactly, yeah. Just trust KB, and they make it and they're successful, and Wendell's like super excited. He's like, this part of him has awoken from his childhood that he hasn't tapped into for so long. And it's always great to see that, because every once in a while, as parents, we have that type of moment too, right? Where we do something and are like, yes, this is so much fun. Why did I ever stop doing this type of thing, right? And you just kind of, you channel that through your kids and kind of, bring that through your kids. Your kids bring that to you. So it was really cool to be able to see that. And the kids were like, well, stop messing around. Now I got to get back to work, right? And then they take right back off, like, don't get cocky, kid, type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then they go to the schoolhouse, and that's where, KB, I'm not really sure what she saw that would make her go in there, or maybe it was just cover, because she's the one that said we need to find cover when they went into the forest in the beginning. So again, the school makes sense and they know it really well. So some opportunity there, I suppose. Yeah, but I wasn't really sure why else she did that aside from positioning us for Neil.
No, exactly. That was my take. Is they made they emphasized the fact that they were constantly being shot overhead. They took some cover here and there in the forest. Once they came out of the forest, it was pretty much open shot. It was a lot of diving and pitching in and out. Yeah. And so it made sense for them to go there. And that's why I felt like we knew it was going to happen, but it didn't feel forced, right? It made sense in the context of the story.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So they go in there, and then, I think it was, where was it? I think the ship's going to need cover is when Neil says that, and he decides to run off. That explosion, though.
Yeah.
I forget who posted it today. Somebody posted it, and I kicked myself for not capturing this moment. But that explosion of Neil with his arms outstretched and the big explosion in the background is just everything.
I just loved it though too before the light comes, he like rolls off screen. Like he's just all super badass already.
Yep.
He's just like a spy. It was just great. I laughed at that scene too. I thought that was really funny.
And some of this kind of goes back to, we talked about the scene on the whole episode on At Attin, right? It turned out it was more than just, now maybe they didn't do as effective job as people wanted, but I think what we said coming out of that episode is, look, the takeaway here is don't get caught up in, the quote fluff or anything else that you might be thinking. The takeaway is, look, they learned some things about war and good versus evil and some skills and that sort of thing, being brave, right? All of that pays off. Maybe the execution didn't happen for a lot of people, and I've seen this already kind of as feedback, but that was the whole point of that episode. So it wasn't fluff. They were explaining that this was, we said as much, they're going to apply what they learned in this episode later down the road. And I think these are prime examples of that, because these are not the same kids that took off from, At Attin at the very beginning of the series.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. I mean, and again, they keep developing confidence and they develop trust in each other that they can rely on one another to do the task that they are responsible for. And if someone says they're going to go, they have an idea, they're going to go take care of it, they just trust that it's going to be done, right? And I think for characters like Neil in particular, I think that was really important, because back on the At Attin episode, he was terrified. He was scared. He didn't want to face these insurmountable odds or things that he's just this kid. What could he possibly do holding a weapon? But now he's like, I know where a turbo laser, he called it a turbo laser. I mean, I know where a turbo laser is at, and, went up there and actually lined it up and did it. Right. So you're right. I mean, this is just showing that the things that they were saying these kids were not capable of just a handful of episodes ago, all of a sudden now they've got the confidence to at least go and try, and generally successful at doing it. Right. And again, it's a younger audience type of show, or an all ages type of show. So these things are we should expect this, right? All of it's pretty well telegraphed. There's no surprises, but what's telling is you still get wrapped up in the moment, and you're like, I know it's coming, but as long as they do it well, and it was fun and it was funny and things like that, I think that's when it really works. That's when they've kind of got you hooked, right? Is when they can tell you what they're going to do, and then when they do it, you still enjoy it, and it's not kind of like, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah.
And I didn't really feel like this in this episode.
No, not at all. And the same could be said, I think, for me, at least personally, throughout most of the series, almost all of the whole series. So, all right. So now that they've dropped Neil off at the school, they head over to the Onyx Cinder. They head in, they realize, they try to take off. I like the fact that Window was surprised that he's like, you guys can fly this thing? Again, more stuff that they've learned. And then the clamps come into place, which we knew was going to happen because they made an effort to show those up close and personal a couple episodes ago. And this is where we get that proud dad moment of, son, you're talking to a level 7 systems coordinator. Get the bike.
That might be the best line in the whole
it needs to go on a shirt. I've already been thinking about putting those lines on a shirt and just selling it, because
what are those like negative space type of shirts where you just see the glasses on the guy and then you get the quote?
Yeah, and the quote.
Oh man. Yeah,
get on that. Yeah, well,
I know. I need to make this happen. Yeah,
we gotta do something for Patreon. So, but yeah, love that line. Love the fact that it was Dad finally had his moment. Right, everybody plays a part. Everybody had a role in this series, including him and Farrah a little bit later. But Neil finds a turbo laser. Jod says that not to kill everyone, right? Since he's going to need the labor to load all of the gold, which is actually something we talked about. Like, in fact, I like that they addressed that. We were. Talking about like, hey,
not to load the gold, to continue to make the gold.
Well, continue to make the gold too, right? I guess he could have the droids, but yeah, he wanted this thing to keep going, and I think it's Fern says as much a little bit later as well.
Yeah, that's where his real plan starts to trickle out of what he really intends to do. He intends to set up camp, and it kind of made me wonder, like, did Tak Renna attempt to do this type of thing and it didn't work out, right? I mean, we'll come back to this on Patreon, but like,
Yeah.
what did Tack Reno, like, how successful was he in this endeavor, or did he even ever make it there? Right. So I think that's going to be kind of a fun conversation to kind of return back to and see maybe what we think after seeing the finale.
Yeah, the
here.
whole origins of At Attin and the Onyx Cinder and all of that. I mean, that seems like, I know we talk about,
They still don't really line up, to be honest with you, but
this is kind of that perfect thing that I would like. I don't need that to be a television series, right? And I don't need it to be a book. That seems like overkill unless they really want to get into the whole, life of and explore Tack Renaud and his tales and adventures, right? Okay, fine. Maybe that's too much though. But this is something that could be like a comic book, like a one shot, just a little quick tale or something they stuff in some kind of anthology book series, right? But I would love to know just kind of something about how all that started. I don't know. Maybe it's a Star Wars Insider article of sorts, right? Or a story, but
that would actually be a pretty good place for a Star Wars Insider short story.
we don't talk enough about Star Wars Insider on this show. And shame on us. But this is where we first starting to see kind of Farah is paralyzed, right? Again, she's feeling conflicted about doing the right thing, going against authority, especially in light of, Jod wielding a lightsaber and her kids there and at risk as well. And Fern gets through her and says that, they have to do something, right? She has that kind of big grown up moment, and it really opens up Farah's eyes. And she has one of the better lines, I think, of this whole series, where she goes on and says, the galaxy is scary and dangerous. Everywhere we went, even the worst places, there were good people too, people that can help us. You have to trust me, right? I mean, speaking out of pure experience, having gone through what they did and speaking as an adult and telling her, look, I'm not that kid. You need to trust me. I know what I'm doing here, right? But they come up with that plan. Jod, of course, hears them and stops it all. And then Jod sends that message to the whole city, says that basically, look, they all work for him now, which is the irony of it all, since they had, he was working for the kids. Now he's got everybody employed for him. They're all going to die if they don't comply. And we then switch over. I guess I don't want to take anything away there. Is there anything you want to touch on between Farah and Fern? Anything else in that scene there? Because it was a really good scene, very poignant scene.
No, I think the only thing you start taking away was the seriousness of Jod with like shooting a blaster at them, and then a little bit later on too, like you start to sense that Jod's kind of to the point where he's had enough, right? He's in the victory lap, but he knows he's not quite there. And so, but no, it was a good dialogue between the two characters as well. And Farah still struggling to understand and really listen to her daughter. And it still takes a while for it to sink in, but this is where she's actually, I think, kind of trying to listen a little bit, and Fern's trying to reach her in a way. So it was a nice little, try to connect there in some way for two characters that have still a hard time being able to communicate. Wendell and Wim have already had their breakthrough. Now we're trying to get that breakthrough between Farah and Fern.
Yeah. My Star Wars guys has joined us, and Chris says, "Stop scheming and listen" was a great line. I laughed out loud. There was lots of, like I said, laugh out loud moments for me in this episode and in the series. Okay, we go back over to Wendell and Wim. Of course, they're still being chased by Vane. They're on their way to the tower because they've got to cut the power in order to allow the clamps to free up or get power back to the clamps so that they can get the ship out of there. And in that process, we get this whole kind of cockamania story where Wim is really using a lot of the skill, like the thing that Jod tells him. I forget what episode it was in the third episode, right? He mentions about how his imagination is really powerful. And so he puts that to use, even though, I mean, Jod never really was buying any of it. But he didn't see that it was really what was happening was it was more of a diversion than anything else. But I did love the way they were just weaving in and out, helping Fern and him were kind of weaving this cockamania story about, he's called the X-Wings. He talks about the Northern Mountains, about the Jedi, Jedi army is on their way, right? And he's like, Wim, the Jedi, they're all dead, which, is kind of shocking probably for him. But, he says later, he goes on to say, look, you're going to need to work on that story. I loved all of that part of it. And then finally, Dad turns on the power. And of course, Jod wrangles all four of them up. He gets Wendell, Wim, Fern, and Farah, and gets them all cornered. And so, but the power's back on. Of course, that frees up the clamps. We get into the Onyx Cinder flying away. The mom's calling over to KB, and she mentions that she's got help. And that's when we first get our big reveal, or surprise, not surprise, that, 33 is still alive. She's holding his head, which I didn't really like in the first viewing. I didn't get what was happening in that scene. I didn't understand that she was actually holding his head at first. And then later on, he's kind of holding his own head, which I'd like to see him. That'd be funny if he just did that all the time. But I think it makes sense, right? Because you see him cut the head off now, but the cables and all that stuff that are attached to the top of his head were still all intact. So, I guess it does work out. But I like the fact that he said, "Hold me steady, girl," as they're flying away there. Neil fires a turbo laser. I thought he was going to get more in. I didn't know it was going to be like a one and done, but I guess it makes sense. I was expecting, when that turbo laser got fired at, that some kind of like planetary shield or even some kind of defense would go up of some sort. That didn't happen. So it was a one and done. I mean, he got one shot off. We got a question a little bit later. I think it's from Routini or one of the Patreon members about whether or not we think he killed anybody. That's actually really crazy and to even think about, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, along those lines, though, I mean, it was starting to wonder about whether or not, like we talked about if anybody would die, even Jod, right? If he would die. And I think some of the emails we had prior to the episode definitely were asking some of the same questions. If he does, who is it going to be? Like Wim that's going to, be the one that does it? And we both strongly believed the kids would not be directly responsible for a death at all, right? And we'll answer the question when we get there, but it was an interesting one, especially as the episode progressed with Jod. How desperate was he going to get, and how extreme were the actions by anybody was going to have to take in any kind of moment. So it started to build the tension a little bit up as this started to continue here.
I did enjoy Neil's lines there too, where he's like, "Go KB, go! I got you covered." And then he's like, "Oh no!" Once he realizes they're about to get shot. So. But yeah, KB
Michael in the chat called this out. I think he's correct. So he thinks that Neil got a couple shots off. I think one, you see it hit the ship exterior, but I think you see another explosion when they're in the ship. So I think he got 2 or 3 off at least. So he got a few pot shots off there and very accurate. So nice job, Neil.
Yeah, even though he never fired the original one, but you know what? That's part of the magic of Star Wars and storytelling.
Yeah, I want to know how he got it all without power. So maybe they've got backup power. I don't know. We got to stop asking questions.
Yeah. Well, they have power at that point because they've already turned it on. Remember?
Yeah.
Window had already hit the buttons and flipped the switches and all that. So
that's right.
But yeah, I mean, maybe it's on auto fire or something. Who knows? So
don't take this away from Neil, Albert.
Yeah, KB and 33 fly up into the atmosphere. This is super exciting stuff. Fly up into the atmosphere. They go past the barrier. She gets on the holo. Immediately calls Kim. I squealed like a little baby when that happened because I was so excited to finally see her. She sends over the coordinates, says that she's going to send the X-Wings. The frigate then gets up there and shoots at the Onyx Cinder, which sends it going down. Really intense moment. I don't think I ever for once thought that KB was in danger. Even at the very end, I was like, okay, we've seen ships in Star Wars go through some really horrible landings and everybody seems to be just fine.
Yeah,
it's the magic of Star Wars, but I mean, it was still an intense moment. Like I liked everything about it. I just never once felt like KB was at risk. Did same for you, or did you feel like no, she's not going to make it out of here?
No, okay. All the kids were going to survive, right? There was no question about that. But I think for a younger audience, I mean, that having that tension and you get, Fern the response, right, and Wim just in shock but her shouting and. The potential loss of your friend, like it got really real all of a sudden. This is all the real stake stuff, and everything they've been doing is almost felt like child's play, so to speak. And now it gets really real whenever you see your friend's ship go down, and you could see the dust and everything. No explosion, but you could definitely see the cloud kind of billow out from where it went down. So, I mean, pretty traumatic for Fern to be able to see that, and we need the stakes to kind of keep increasing and at least feel like that. And I think this was a really powerful moment for Jod too that you're about to get to.
Yeah. I mean, it was another happy landing. I think, Jod making the kids go out there and watch, right? It made the parents go out there and watch as that ship was coming down and saying, look, this didn't have to happen, Yeah. He did have a sense of shame there. And this is where my assessment of Jod, and I'm just going to say it now because we're going to talk about a couple of moments, especially from here on out, right? When KB potentially dies, you do start to kind of see that barrier come down in moments, whether it's just through his, some of the expressions on his face, some of the things that he says. I do feel like I'm not ready to say this guy has really any good in him. I'm going to go back to the Dungeons and Dragons alignment thing. He's more of a kind of a chaotic neutral character. But I don't think he's evil. I've kind of ruled that out, especially after this. Yeah, he did some really menacing things, some very sinister things in the past episode, but that was for a purpose. A lot of it might have been kind of, grandstanding and trying to make himself bigger than he was and instill fear and all that. But at the end of the day, it does feel like he's not an evil person, but he's not necessarily a good person. And I don't suspect that he'll ever become a good person, I think is my takeaway after this series. I see him more as just kind of continuing to be, should his story continue on either in Skeleton Crew or in other works of Star Wars, whether TV series, books, whatever it is, it just feels like he's going to be kind of one of those reoccurring characters like a Loki that pops up. And yeah, he might save the day. He might do some really great things, but he's going to do some really bad things because he's going to always revert and always, retract back to that same character that he's always been. I don't think there's anything that's probably going to ever change him. And I'm kind of happy and okay with that. But what do you think?
Yeah, he definitely does the things that he feels like he has to do. So if he has to kill, there's a purpose to it. Like with Brutus, right? There was a pretty clear purpose, that probably 2 or 3 purposes that needed to happen, right? And so, but yeah, you feel that actual genuine regret that this really didn't need to happen. If you guys would just do what I tell you, you get to work, you check the box, you fall into step, you obey, everything's going to be fine. But it's all very self-centered perspective, right? Of as long as you do what I say and what I want you to do, so I can get control over my life. Because as he's going to tell us here in just a few minutes, he never felt like he's had it, right? This hunger that he was talking about with the rest of the crew, I think it comes out here too. But he doesn't necessarily want harm to happen to the kids, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he cares about them enough to not shoot his blaster at them, which I think he was actually kind of taking a shot at the mom, like to try, right? And at one point I thought maybe she got hit too, but I don't think that actually was the case, of course. But yeah. When Fern was like saying, "I'm sorry," I was like, "Oh crap, did she actually get hit? Did I miss that?" But no, it was a wild shot. But but it was good to see some humanity left in him to where he knows that this was unnecessary. But then he goes right around and turns around and blames it on somebody else, which is exactly, I think, to your point, that is at his stage in life, is it even possible that he would ever turn around and be able to view any of this in a way that says that. To kind of learn and grow and change from that. And at this point, it's possible at Star Wars, these things do happen a lot.
Never rule it out, but
you really can't. But I mean, as they kept doubling down on the character throughout this series, I mean, you kind of feel like no. And I want to talk a little bit, we get to the very end of the episode, I want to get your thoughts too about what we saw, because it kind of suggests that he hasn't learned a damn thing throughout the whole thing. But so, but yeah, it was good to see a little of that humanity come out, especially with, one of the kids that, while he may not want to admit it, there's a small attachment,
Yeah. And Chris mentioned something here I think makes a lot of sense. He says, John definitely looked slightly disappointed to see Katie falling. I think he viewed her as the most practically useful, which lines up with his survivalist resourceful mentality. So again, probably playing more to what, you said and what Michael said just now here too, chaotic, selfish. Definitely I can see that. Dante asks, maybe he'll join up with Thrawn. He's got a lot to learn from Thrawn. That would be
a terrible alliance.
Or it could be a very fruitful one. Who knows?
I don't think Thrawn would tolerate his stuff very long.
I mean, if he listened to Thrawn, but that's the problem, right? I guess more than anything.
It wouldn't work.
Rob says, I thought maybe he was acting more tough than he had to be as a way to protect the kids from the other pirates. I can see that angle, but I don't think that was the case. At least I don't think they did enough to kind of make us think that was more. It did feel it was coming across more as just selfishness and, whatever he needed to do to get the gold.
I think that's definitely what we wanted to see. I know that's what I wanted to see as well, but I think at the end of the day, it all felt like everything was a facade. It was just one facade after another. I think Jude Law in some of the interviews, they said as much to where there's probably credibility to saying that everything's an act with him. You can't tell what's genuine and what's not. You're always questioning it. So by default, almost all of it's a lie because you just can't trust any of it.
Okay, look at my boy, One Up versus
Lord.
CPU. He's coming in. This is I love this guy. Is he more or less evil than Lorna D? That is an excellent question. I'd like to now take the next 30 minutes and debate.
What's interesting is Lorna D is probably more good than Jod Nana would at this stage.
At this stage, yeah. No, yeah. I agree, and I would imagine One Up would agree as well. Like we've got so much of Lorna D now that it's hard to say that, comparing her where she is in her current storyline versus where Jod is right now, Lorna is way more good. But there was a moment when Lorna D was on the same path that Jod is on and was at that same stage that Jod is on, which is going back to what we just talked about, right? You never know. You can't rule it out. If they, depending on where this character goes and how much they want to expand upon the character, they could kind of go down that path. I'm not even ready to rule out that Lorna D is going to be 100% good. Like, Scott does a really good job of making sure that she's good enough, but
she keeps
not
that edge.
Fully there, right? She still has that edge, exactly. Yeah. So,
but I think it's a great call out, though, because I think they do have very similar trajectories. If you were to look at their behaviors and what drives them, what motivates them, even their childhood and history, like there's a lot of similarities. We want to compare Jod with like Sid, right? But really, Lorna might be a better comparison, almost literally, since she was with a pirate band, effectively, right? And what they needed to do.
Had some time with a Jedi as well.
Yeah. Now, granted, I think Lorna was way more violent than Jod, but we also don't have the whole story of Jod. And like you said, we've spent a lot of time with Lorna. So
yeah.
We know a lot of the skeletons because she put them there.
Yeah. Yeah. She put them in the closet, buried them in the closet.
Yep.
All right. Great call out on Lorna D. Let's go back to, this is going back into more of what Jod is going on about, right? He's angry. It didn't need to be like this. Doesn't matter who you call. They can't get through the barrier. He delivers that line almost like he's disappointed, right? Like, this is all fruitful. I don't understand why you would do this and why you would risk your lives because we can't get through the barrier. This is the moment where you said, where you mentioned that Jod shoots at Fern and Farrah as she finally decides to go out and try to destroy the barrier, pull the switch. He force pushes Wendell away to the side. You had this moment here where you're thinking, oh, wow, they're all going to come together and have this like family heroic moment, which doesn't play out. And Wim has his hand out on the handle, and puts a lightsaber up over at Wendell's throat, says the good guys are coming. He says, no one's coming for you, boy, grow up. That's not. And then he kind of has this moment where, he snaps, right? It evokes a memory of sorts for him. And we finally get the background. It's funny because we talked about like, we said this could happen.
Villain monologues, man.
Yeah.
They happen at some point.
Yeah.
And so we finally got to that moment, right? It's right before they die usually. So this was a pretty appropriate timing too.
It was. And we talked about how this was going to have to be the only, given where we were in the series and how they were already on At Attin and, with 40 minutes left, this is probably how what's going to happen. And sure enough, it was. He starts and go into this whole monologue.
It's always in that stressful moment where they've given up and they're just exasperated. Like, why do you keep doing this? And then it somehow comes out, right?
Yeah.
Pretty standard, but it worked.
But he says, when I was your age, all I cared about was not starving. And by the way, pause, time out.
Yeah.
That whole home chef promotion they've got going on. I posted this today.
Wait, what?
Have you seen this? So
Clearly
Home Chef.
I mean, I know what Home Chef is, but I have no idea where you're going.
So Home Chef is doing they're doing a skeleton crew promotion where like you can sign up and you get like some skeleton crew posters and some other swag or whatever. And the entire time I keep getting these ads in my feeds, right? I'm like, this is so bizarre. Why are they doing a promotion with Skeleton Crew and Home Chef where you get meals delivered to your home? And I thought, holy bananas. There's the hook right there. They're actually talking about Jod saying that he's starving here. And he says, I'm hungry in like 2 episodes ago as well. So it's got to be the only explanation. All right. Anyways, he goes on to say, I was living in a hole in the ground. This Jedi found me.
I just can't with you sometimes.
I know. Just smile and nod. She may have been desperate and ragged like me, but she told me I had potential, and then he kind of gathers his composure. Well, she only taught me a little bit before they hunted her down, and they made me watch whilst they killed her. That's the galaxy. It's dark with a few pinpricks of light, and for those, I'll kill who I need to kill. This question comes up a little bit later, and I'm probably going to steal a little bit of thunder, but I think it's important to call out. Jod was not part of Order 66. Order 66 had already happened. The way I interpret this and almost verbally was that, this Jedi, whoever she was, I don't think it's anybody we know. It's very likely it's just another random Jedi of thousands that were kind of scattered throughout the galaxy, probably got Kenobi's message about don't come back to the temple. And she was living a life on the run and kind of ran across him as a Force sensitive, took him in maybe for protection, showed him a couple tricks here and there, but eventually the Inquisitors and Vader caught up and killed her. I don't think there was any part of me. There's no part of me now that believes that he was actually in the Jedi Temple as a Padawan officially, right? These were probably just lessons to help him control the Force more than anything else. I mean, it feels like maybe he got a couple swings in there, right? Because he was able to deflect the stun bolts, but that's my interpretation on it.
I think you're spot on. I think he, again, the age, like the number of years and the age is a little bit quirky, but again, he could have been hungry during the Clone Wars, so many years before Clone Wars. Although he said that she found him around Wim's age. So I don't know, it's a little unclear because that would make him only about 40-ish now, and maybe the galaxy ages you as a pirate. I don't know, but
well, look what it did to Kenobi on Tatooine. But yeah, go on.
Very true. Yeah. So, but regardless, I think you're exactly right. Though she found him after Order 66 while she was in hiding, because she was in pretty rough shape too, and then she started to see promise and. You keep the traditions alive, and we've seen this in the comic books. We've seen this elsewhere with Order 66 too, where even in the Kenobi series to an extent, right, of still reaching out and watching over and identifying some. And do you always get involved? Clearly no. The Jedi made a lot of decisions not to, but in some cases they do, and they maybe not necessarily an apprentice, but they form a bond. I mean, we saw it with Kanan and Ezra, of course, too, right? Closer to the Galactic Civil War, but. So this type of things happen, but I agree with you. I think this is exactly where it was. She was she was part of the purge and survived it, and then the Inquisitors or somebody eventually came back, and that they would make an example of her. Why they let him go? Maybe they didn't notice anything special about him, but that would be surprising because based on the literature that we have with the Inquisitors, they would have taken him and potentially wanted to turn him or put him into like an Inquisitor type of program or something like that too.
Yeah. No,
we knew they were taking more infants, maybe not his age, but it would have been interesting they let him survive unless he somehow got away. But that seems unlikely given the Inquisitor's thoroughness.
Yep. I'm 100% with you. When he said that, I thought, well, wait a minute, that wouldn't line up. Now, they could explain it a couple different ways, maybe, but based on what we know, based on the comics, based on the books, yeah, no, he probably, they would not have done that.
I think he may have. So I think, again, can you trust everything he says? He feels like he's pretty genuine in this moment.
Yeah.
But he could have been, he came up on the scene and watched, and they made an example of her in public or whatever it might be, because we know they do that, right? The Inquisitors have done that in Kenobi. So, is this something else that he just saw, but this is how he interpreted it? And again, his brain has just made this the true story over time, because it's just a source of so much pain and anguish, right? And again, that desperation, I really love the way they wrote this, though, the pinpricks of light and the desperation that he would go through and the lengths that he would go to just to be able to grab on and hang on to those small little moments of victory and success. And I think that really sums him up in a nutshell about what we've been talking about the last 2 months about this character and about what is truly driving him. And is this these small little dreams, these just tiny little opportunities that you finally feel like you can do it. You finally get the big score, but he's equated it all to money at this point, which isn't the point, right? And so, but it was really good summary for the character overall, and finally clarify, I think, his drivers, I think, for the audience, if there was any question at this point, which I imagine most people probably not, but for anybody that thought there was good in him, at least what drives not bad people to do bad things, right?
Yeah. No, well said. And all of that, kind of culminates in Wim finally letting go and then runs back over to his dad to be at his side. He goes on, he's kind of talking. He says, I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to damage this wonderful planet. I want you all to go back to making credits, right? I actually believed him at that point, because I felt like, okay, that's probably what he would do. He would really want. He doesn't want everything. He doesn't want the Republic. He doesn't want the attention. He doesn't want anything destroyed because it's going to prolong creating more gold. So he felt genuine in saying all that. Pretty safe to say at this point that the great work officially now is just creating credits. Like, that was the great work, is what they were doing on At Attin. And he's going on, right?
You wonder if it fed into maybe an overall great work between the other planets as well.
Yeah, I've got that already. I've got that tagged when we get into the Patreon, because I want to come back and revisit again the jewels of the old Republic and what their role was in the galaxy.
We need to break this Patreon episode up because it's in a lot of different directions.
No, I've got it. Don't worry. It'll work out.
I'm worried. It's fine. I'll worry for both of us.
But as he's sitting there monologuing, Wendell finally has had enough. He gets up and then sucker punches John right in the face. I had said it was going to be Noel. I was just as happy, probably more happy that it was him because it was the unsuspecting character. Noel just looked like a bad mofo, right? He looked like a big dude with tusks, and he always had this kind of heavy brow and looked angered, and probably had a couple of 40 ounces in him. But the fact that it was Wendell, right? Him coming out of, like you said earlier, like him coming out of his shell and doing something that you would have never expected, right? I mean, it was just probably more shocking to him. But I love the fact that he punched him. Of course, this drops John's lightsaber to the ground. Wendell tries to run out and pull the handle. This is where Wim picks up the lightsaber. And I thought for sure when they had the lightsaber and Jod was using the force to pull him, I was like, oh my goodness, they're going to ignite it and it's going to go right through him or something, or this is how Jod's going to go out. I think that was all done intentionally.
There was a moment
I was suspenseful there.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I definitely thought there was a moment. I was like, oh no,
yeah,
they wouldn't do this to Wim, right? Like, there's just no way. Right? We've had a really firm line here that no, the kids aren't going to kill anybody, and here we are, kind of flirting with it. But it was done nicely. What was interesting? Did you hear, like, when he was using the force on Wendell's hand, like you could hear his knuckles like,
starting to crack
back.
Yeah.
Ugh, I was like, oof, that doesn't feel comfortable. Doesn't sound comfortable at all.
Yeah. But of course, in all of this suspenseful moment here, Farrah finally does what she never thought she would ever do, which is go ahead and pull that handle and blow up, whatever the barrier at that point. Jude Law's face, once she pulls a handle, if you look at it, he starts closing his eyes. And this is just his acting again. There's probably a million things that are going through John's mind at that point. And you can just see it all over his face. Like, he's just like, oh, what the hell am I going to do now? Or, he's probably, we'll talk about this in a minute. I think he's trying to think about, okay, what's my next move now?
Yeah.
But he does close his eyes as the barrier starts to go down. He finally opens his eyes when, the big light, he's illuminated in light. I don't know if there's anything symbolic about that. Probably not, but I love the way they did that. And just that stare at Fern and Wim is like mean and says everything. I just love that whole look that he was kind of giving them at that point. Right. We get Wim igniting the lightsaber, which we had suspected was going to happen, him igniting it. He has his little heroic moment there, like we talked about. I was cheering. I love that whole bit of it. But safe to say he's keeping the lightsaber?
Oh, yeah. And I'm pretty sure later on he's looking at, so before at the very end when he was looking at the X-Wings and stuff, I thought for sure he was looking at the ship like, we're keeping the ship too.
Maybe that's what it was.
Like, man, he's just collecting artifacts left and right.
He's got to get a way to find a way to get off this planet, right? I mean,
right.
So I'll maybe save it for Patreon, but I do have, I kind of think I know where this story is going to go at this point, just based on that last moment there. Anyways,
right, we'll talk about if there's a season 2 or not, but
yeah, well, we will touch on that here in just a second. So, Jod throws his musket blaster over to the side, which I thought was an interesting choice.
Yeah, he just kind of gave up, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Just kind of gave up. And then the barrier going down, I thought the visual effects were just spectacular. Everything from the outside shot, seeing it kind of going down around the planet and kind of coming down, and everybody, the way it was cutting back and forth, that all just felt very cinematic. Didn't feel like television for me. It felt very cinematic in a lot of ways. But
the oohs and the ahs from the people seeing stars.
Yeah. And this goes back to, the episode 1 when he's like, there are more than 4. I think it was Neil or whoever it was surprised there were more than 4 stars because they couldn't see past, more than that through the barrier. But yeah, great shot. And then, oh my God, the X-Wings coming in at that point, the B-Wings showing up, which is just like, they didn't have to do that, but, they really wanted to see how far I would go in my ecstasy. And then just them firing, that sound of the X-Wings shooting the frigate and the explosions of the blaster bolts hitting on and going off on the hull of the frigate, it sounded like the trench runs during A New Hope. Like, I hadn't heard that sound in a long time, and I'm sure that was on purpose, but loved all of that. The pirates then retreat. We got to see the B-Wings. What is that cannon that they have? I forget what it's called.
I forgot the name of it too, yeah.
Dang it. Something cannon. I forget what it is, but them using that, I hadn't seen that used in, I don't know, like you said, like Jedi Knight 2, or not Jedi Knight, Rebel Assault, I think is the last time I remember even seeing that used. But
it was in Rebels, wasn't it, with Hera?
Oh, well, yes, it was in Rebels. Yep. Yeah, in that one episode where we learned the origin of the B-Wings. Yeah, and then Fern mentions that KB, and so they run off. The music here was great. I don't think we've talked enough or talked much about the music at all tonight on this episode, but it was really wonderful here. It's very poignant. And then Wim kind of turns around and he calls out to Jod, almost like, hey, you know, you want to come with me kind of thing. But I don't know. What did you think? I guess the question is, why did Wendell call out to Jod? Do you think he was feeling like, hey, come with us, or don't stay here? Or did he feel like, hey, you're a good guy again? Was it just, does he still look up to him?
I have no idea, actually. This really surprised me. I'm like, what is he yelling out? I think Wim still had some connection back to Jod, though. I mean, he did sit with him. They felt like they did, in a sense, bond, on the ship and have some of those moments, even though he's really talked down, like Jod's really talked down to him several times now, since then. But I think there's a certain element of like not wanting to leave someone behind. These are still good kids, right? They still have big hearts, even though they've been betrayed. Like Fern didn't give 2 cares about him, right? She's like, leave that, what behind.
Yeah.
But Wim's, he's the bleeding heart of the group besides Neil, I think, right? And wanting to nurture those relationships, especially one that really fit Wim as far as like adventure goes, right? And this potential lifestyle change that he could have of not having to have a career on At Attin, and he can actually live a life of adventure, and that's possible. And look, you can change, you can be good, just say you're sorry, right? It's almost like Neil was channeling himself through Wim of just, if you just say you're sorry, we could probably make some progress and we can clean this whole thing up and we'll be fine, right? Again, the lens of a child sometimes, but I think Wim's also going to learn lessons to let go too. But I was really a little bit confused, though. We could probably speculate on it, but I don't.
No, that was my take as well.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was my take. Just something a kid would honestly do. But yeah, Jod's look, when they kind of cut over and we get that final look from him about from, at least as he's looking at the kids, he's almost kind of a little smirk on his face. They of course leave. He walks out to watch, his ship and his crew and his whole future, everything that he had been working towards, just kind of go down. All the gold is probably what he's thinking about, watching that whole thing just burn and sink down. Right. He has that final look on his face that's, it's so subtle, but I guess any thoughts about what was going on in his mind? What do you think was happening here?
At the very last shot of
his
him?
very last shot. I have my own thoughts, but
looked like a smirk, didn't it?
It did look like a smirk.
Yeah, it's almost like he had another plan, another idea.
That's where I was too. I'm like, okay, he's got another scheme, another plan. He's already thinking 4 steps ahead of everybody here.
Means he has not learned a single lesson whatsoever.
Right.
Effectively. Yeah, he's just got another plan. There's something else that has popped into his mind, and that he has an opportunity here of still making something work. Right. Whatever that might be at this point, I don't know what that would be, but he's got a scheme. Right. There's always another idea that's just waiting to be, another opportunity waiting to be created and seized. So,
yeah, I like Trent's take on this. He says, nah, he was proud of the kids. I like that. I don't think that's the case personally, but I like that idea, that he would be like, yeah, kids did good. They did something they did more than I thought they would. They stood up to me, kind of thing.
What do you think? So do you think Jod is going to be captured, thrown in prison? Like what's Jod's fate? Or is he going to escape? Like if you were just to speculate about what happened in the next 20 minutes, he escape? Did they get arrest him? Like what do you think happens?
I think he gets away. I do.
Think so too. Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly a compelling story if he is captured, but then he becomes like, okay, well, who rescues him? How does he get out? Right. It doesn't feel like he'd be somebody that they would just let out anytime soon on good behavior. Even if he was captured, the fact that he's force sensitive, always kind of, we see him get out of places before, and he's gotten out of sticky situations using the force before. So I don't think he's actually contained. So I don't hate that. But I like more the idea that he's now lived another day and he will pop up later down the road, next to Thrawn or whatever.
Yeah. Just kidding. Thrawn. I think he gets arrested, thrown in the mines, and then marries Wendell's wife.
There you go. Well, yeah, whatever. Sure. Uh, Mike says, I was wondering about the choice of the Republic fighters to shoot down the pirate ship over a residential area, but I guess it was shoot first, ask questions later.
Dude, that's right on the money. This is Star Wars in a nutshell. Like, it doesn't matter where you're at, just casualties be damned. We're just going to go ahead and take out the threat. And
the Jedi were notorious for this.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the Marquez
we value
sisters.
life, but just not right now.
Yeah. Look at the Marquez sisters. That was their whole beef with the Jedi, is that, they brought war and didn't give a crap about what they did or who they had to take out. So,
right. So I'm assuming some of the pirates survived, though. I mean, they
landed in the water.
The ship didn't blow up, right? It took some really heavy damage, but
it lands in the water. The only water in the whole area,
yeah, which I think was a kind of a consolation prize. It didn't land into a house, but it did tear up the roads pretty well and all of that. But
yeah,
so I'm assuming that they've probably got a brig full of pirates now.
Yeah,
or the New Republic probably will transport them somewhere.
Yeah, and they'll get away because that's usually what happens when they're on a Republic transport ship on their way to prison.
Yeah,
someone breaks
the Mandalorian, and they're all really on that Mandalorian ship when he takes out Bill Burr's character.
Right, and they all died there. Gunter goes down with the ship, I guess, which noble for him. Alex asked me, he's like, "Why did
he was begging everybody else to stay?"
Well, he said, "Man your post," and everybody's like, "Hell no, we're out of here, buddy. Sorry, you're not even the captain." Alex said that they missed an opportunity there. He didn't say it here. He messaged me. He said they missed an opportunity for him to turn to the audience and say, "Did I do that?" As Urkel, since he took down, the ship went down.
Alex.
Yeah, telling you, man. But KB, they head to the school. We get to see the onyx cinder. It's kind of hanging there in the middle of the big testing room area. The mouth of it opens up and outpours. It's almost like a mouth and like throwing up vomiting gold. KB's in there as well. She's alive. She echoes the B1 droid saying, "Did we win?" from like episode 3 or whatever it was, or episode 2. Mm-hmm. 33 saying, "Yep, one of my better landings." That is. They get everyone. They run off. Neil picks up Snowball, which I thought, oh, why would they show that? I mean, I could see where, there's an argument to be made that Snowball is going to continue to live with 33, but I can see Neil picking that up, and now Neil and Snowball are a thing, right? That seems appropriate. I can totally see that. So,
Snowball was on top of KB's head too, so on the ship. So
yeah, that's right. He jumped up there. They never said his name. They never said Snowball. It's a shame.
It's called a rat.
Yeah, it's a rat. I forget who was it. I think it was Fern says, "Hey, Wim, looks like you don't need to take your assessment anymore." And that's when he's kind of looking up. He's not even thinking about the assessment.
Total 80s movie line.
Yeah.
Guess you don't have to take your assessment anymore, huh?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he's looking up there, and sees the 2 X-Wings followed by the blockade runner. I suspect that Kim's on that ship. I was talking to Becca today. I'm with her. Like, I think she posted that she felt like it's probably somebody like Leia. And I know that's probably a suspension of disbelief because that blockade runner showed up really fast along with everybody else. But
and this is literally 8 years after Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
Leia's probably not out surfing the galaxy at this point.
I think she's there. If At Attin was a mysterious planet and all the gold is there, I would think they're going to send some pretty high representatives. It doesn't have to be Leia, but
that quickly though. I mean, this is like first responders, so it just seems like Leia's probably not leading the frontline charge anymore. I guess is probably where I would come from. Not that she wouldn't. I agree with you. I think in the longer run, she would definitely. Her and Mon Mothma both would probably be out there, right? But I think as far as
that blockade runner had Leia, had Admiral Akbar was on there.
Luke was on there too.
Luke was on there.
Yeah, he took
Chewie's
a break.
the co-pilot. Yeah.
No, Chewie and Han are gone.
No, they're still around. They're just they called him in for this reason.
No, they've already bailed.
But Kim's on that ship. Like, Kim has to be there. I hate the fact that they left that open. But anyways, it ends with them. We get to see that they have a moon, which I never saw that moon to begin with. But okay, whatever. It was cool that they had one. So
we didn't know where their son was either. But yeah, so
Dante says she was on a diplomatic mission at the time.
Right. And Jod was the ambassador /
emissary. The emissary, yeah. All right. This show's gone off the rails at this point. So that's how it ended. And if you didn't watch it,
go watch it. You heard us talk about it, but go watch it.
All right, let's get into our questions. And we'll give away our ship and give away our poster and everybody can get out here and go to bed. And so First question is from Mr. Pink. Mr. Pink says, do we see any of Neil's species other than his family in the show at all? Now, this was asked before the final episode. We just brought it over, so it's part of it. And I don't, I meant to do this today, and I just ran out of time. I don't recall seeing other of his race.
Just his family, yeah. Which I think it was generally
budget things. You think of budget reasons? I mean, we had other Arthurians.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's also we just kind of make them unique too, right? So
yeah, okay.
They could be elsewhere on the planet, but yeah, we didn't see them though at all.
So. All right.
Music Train over on Patreon, of course, just after the question we just did, was that Leia's ship?
We all agreed, yes, that was Leia's ship.
That was not everybody's opinion, but yeah. I'll tell you what, since that was a minority answer, I'll give you the next one here. So Utini from Patreon, do you think Neil killed anyone? Also, it's kind of ironic that Neil, the one who advocated against fighting in a previous episode, is the only one who actually attacked anyone.
Yeah, that's an astute observation. We expect that from Utini. Yeah, I would imagine he did. Like, I mean, especially if it fired more than once. I mean, there was explosions. There were people in those areas, probably in the I don't know, the turret areas or bays or whatever the heck they were when firing.
We just said the kids didn't kill anybody. Now you're going back on what we talked about.
I'm saying not intentionally, but I mean, he fired the turbo laser. So
no, he did not kill anybody. Neil is pure. Neil is innocent. He's not turning into Jod. He's fine.
Yeah.
No, he did not kill anybody.
It wasn't in cold blood. It was in pure defense. I think it's honorable the way he did it, if he did, which he did. Okay. Lucid Truth says, here we go. Here's the question. Yeah. Should they do a season 2? I think they could leave it as is, though I'm curious what would happen to the world after.
Yeah, and I posed a similar question over on Patreon today, too, about whether they should do a season 2.
Keep it short, because this is a whole discussion that we're going to have on Patreon.
Yeah, I guess the general question is, I don't know. I agree with you, though, Lucid Truth, and J-Dubs replied in the Discord as well. I think they could stop here, and we feel pretty good about it, right? Yeah, there's question marks, there's open-ended things, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily, we're an incomplete story whatsoever. I think that's the key difference between maybe some of the other content. Is like this one does feel like, yeah, we actually have pretty good closure, right? We actually have an end. There's definitely more story to be told, like there definitely would be in a real-life situation, but I think this is something that they could leave it here if they wanted to, and we could talk about the less fun stuff about whether there's going to do a season 2 or not. But I think generally they could leave it here, and I would be very satisfied with this and be okay with it, and not feel like I was shortchanged out of future stories. Am I interested in some of the stuff that they could tell? I think generally, actually, yeah, I think I am kind of interested though. So I think they could, and I think they could follow. I think they would follow back up with what happened next with Jod. I think you kind of still follow the same stories. I don't know that you have to go Mando verse, Filoni verse type of thing though. So that's the interesting part of they didn't tie it in, right? Really at all, which I'm happy they did not. But would season 2 need to tie into Filoni verse? Possibly. What about you?
Well, I think the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
Do they need to do it? They should. No, wait, hold on. The question is, should they do a season 2? So I think it depends on who you ask. If you ask the fans, yes, they should. If you ask the creators, yes, they should. If you ask the crew, the actors, yes, they should. Unfortunately, based on what we saw with the Acolyte, it's going to be about finances and numbers. I
wasn't going to go there, Albert. I said I wasn't going to.
I'm going to save that. I'll contextualize that in the Patreon episode. What I will say in addition to that is there is like you said, the way this ended, it certainly wrapped up it gave us all the answers of the stuff that we needed to know. It left some things open, which is always a good thing to have so that you can kind of build upon that, whether it's a season 2 or if they want to pick up these threads and beats in some other series or whatever, it's available to them. I don't know that I like the idea of coming back to a season 2 specifically because the Barry that we've been talking about, the big elephant in the room, the big Neil species in the room, is there's the main characters are kids, right? Yeah. And so at what point, how do you allow the kids to leave planet and endanger themselves? You can get there a couple different ways. Some I think are kind of obscure. But I think there's one clear path, and this is where I was saying when I saw Neil looking up into that, I thought, oh my gosh, this is how they're going to how we're going to see more of Neil and the kids later on. But Wim, sorry, yeah. This is how we're going to see Wim a little bit later. So I'll save that for the Patreon show. So there is a way there. I think a season 2 is very unlikely at this point. And I'm not saying that as a Debbie Downer. I mean, I freaking love this whole series and I love the finale, but it's just really difficult to get there at this point.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay. Devin Rivers. We're going to try to summarize this one a little bit here. Thanks for the email. Do you think that Jod gave up so quickly after the barrier was destroyed because he knew he'd lost, or do you think he was just living his life as a pirate to survive?
Yeah, I think his guard went down. I think it was about survival mode. There was no point at that. He had no leverage. I mean, everything had turned on him. And his ship was gone. The barrier was gone. The gold was gone. He knew the Republic was coming. There was no way out. So at that point, it was throw my weapon to the side, say goodbye, give a couple smirks, and I need to be thinking about how the hell I'm going to get off this planet, right, and get away from this because I need to live another day. It was purely self-preservation at that point.
Yeah, I think there was no chance of winning at that point, and I think he realized that. Now, was it necessary for him to throw the blaster down? Probably not. He probably could be like, I'm just going to go ahead and go this way and get out, because Wim wasn't going to deflect a blaster. I mean, he clearly still had the power in the total dynamic, right? He had the force, he had a gun, but the prize was no longer there. And so it didn't really serve him in any way. And again, to your point, I think just a little while ago, I don't think he genuinely wanted to hurt the kids or the family. He just wanted to really threaten them to make sure they just fall into line and do what he wants them to do so he can win. And so without that prize, what's the point? And he's not a cold-blooded killer necessarily in that respect to these kids, at least. Brutus is a little different story, but for these kids, there has to be a purpose of why he's going to kill if we believe what he said to us, a little earlier in the show.
Yeah. And Devin, thank you again for the kind words. There was more to it and said we were the greatest show and all that stuff. And that's super humbling and really appreciate it. So thank you so much for the kind email.
Yep. Thanks, Devin.
Okay. John Maloney asked, do you think Jod was recruited before Order 66?
Yeah. I think recruited might be a more general term, but I think, he was found after, I think it was after Order 66.
Order 66, yeah.
Yeah. I think it was afterwards. So I think the way that he told the story that he was living in poverty, didn't know where he was going to be fed, and then was found by a Jedi who was effectively in the same position that he was, really ragged, suggests that it was after Order 66 on the run, just hiding. How long they were together, we don't really get a good feel for that, but long enough for her to be able to teach him some things and be able to do that. So, as I imagine their relationship went on for maybe at most maybe a year or so after Order 66 if he was found sometime around Order 66, but exact timing is going to be really difficult to nail down.
Yep. I agree. I said as much earlier too, so. Yep. Yeah, but thank you, John.
All right. Tommy on Trip from YouTube. What was Neil's dad doing while the other parents went down to meet the kids? Everybody's favorite question. Maybe he is busy secretly administering at the tower, or just, looking after the children. Well, actually, Mom was with the children, I think, on the front lawn for a while.
I don't know, man. Noel's an interesting character. Like, again,
he's not. He's just in the garage drinking, dude.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think he gets off work. He stops at the 7-Eleven, picks up a couple of tall boys, grabs a 6-pack, heads over to the beer garage, sits down, and just doesn't want anything to do with the screaming kids. He never wanted 3 to begin with. He wanted 1 maybe, and now he's got 3, can't deal with it. There's a lot of pressure at work. And so, he's throwing him back.
That's might have tapped into something that Albert wants to talk about.
That's going to be, I mean, they put the St. Pauli girl poster in there for a reason. So that's his alibi. That's his reason. So thank you for that, Tommy. Appreciate it. Jeremy Reese via email, where or what would you like to see a season, or let me read that again. Where or what would you see a season 2 headed if it was greenlit? Oh man, I said I was going to save this for Patreon.
Well, yeah, maybe high level. You can give us some.
Well, it's your question first. You go.
I really don't know, because I don't want to get into the boring rebuilding of At Attin and then working it into the New Republic. Like, I really don't want another one of those stories, to be honest with you. That's why I'm okay with us being left as just a 1-season series. But if we did, I mean, I would like to probably go back and follow Jod and then somehow bring the kids back. If season 2 follows the same characters, I think that's probably the other question though, is Skeleton Crew these 5 characters? Is that, 6 with SM33? If it's these 6 characters, then we pick up going after Jod. Maybe they get Jod disappeared and they get an idea of where he has gone, and they feel like he's important to be able to bring back in. Maybe they find that there's hope. Wim doesn't want to give up on him, whatever it might be. And then that kind of leads to the next adventure. That's a little bit soft, I think, but I think if you need to stay with these 6 characters, then you have something there. But what I'm not super interested in is not really rebuilding At Attin, incorporating with the New Republic, figuring out how the money stuff works with the rest of it. Like, I just don't. And actually, I'm a little sad that the New Republic is there because you just know it's all downhill from here,
Yeah.
right? Nothing good is going to come from the New Republic having this planet. It just seems, right? It was pristine and perfect, and now it's sullied and a little bit tainted.
Okay, I'll keep it succinct and say like the only way I think a season 2 can happen is there has to be a significant time jump. I'll leave it at that. So, all right.
That's what I mean. We talk about this a lot. That's
Yeah.
that's a way you can work around a lot of different things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but
Yep.
All right. One more question.
Oh yeah, Julian from Instagram. Thanks, Julian, for sending this over to us. So, due to the Acolyte ending, do you think there was any chance that there was one? Wait. I need to read the whole thing. Is that right? Well, let me just read his whole thing because it makes more sense for me to read.
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
for
Sure,
everyone
sure.
here. So the ending seemed kind of abrupt to me. It was really good, but it seemed like it ended fast and seemed like the perfect type of show to have a post-credit scene of some sort. So due to the Acolyte ending, do you think there was any chance that there was one written or filmed that they just chose to cut from a post-credit scene?
Probably not. Just because it doesn't, there are still like covenants in Star Wars that they don't do. We've broken some of those already, at least what I thought were covenants of Star Wars, and I don't have a problem with that. But my suspicion is that maybe if I had to make an argument for it, maybe at some point in some version of the script, there might have been a post-credit scene, or there might have been more material that was going to be told throughout the series and that they had to cut out, and they thought, okay, maybe we should just shelve that, and maybe we can tell that as, a post-credit scene. I think usually, well, I shouldn't say that. It doesn't make any sense. But what we got is probably likely the version of the script. I don't think they really would have diverted from that. You hear about in the midst of production while they're filming, they'll make changes to the script, but nothing as drastic as like, oh, we're going to have to table this, or we're going to suddenly now we're going to do a post-credit scene. Unfortunately, I mean, I like the idea of post-credit. I love post-credit scenes. Like I will sit there through all of the credits and watch the mid-credits and the post-credits and the post-credits. But for Star Wars and for this story, it just feels like, no, probably not. I don't think there was one here. I could be wrong, but if they did, it had to have been in like an older version of the script, and likely might have been, axed by, Disney or Lucasfilm and said, look, that's cool, but we're not really to kind of really break that seal just yet.
Yeah, every show is a little bit different. Some will have they'll have a few endings that they write to try to feel which one is feeling right. And they may even film one or two just to see, but they're usually variations they're usually not so stark like we've seen in some deleted scenes where they give you like a whole different ending or something, like an alternate ending. It seems like that's pretty uncommon. I think within Star Wars, that seems relatively uncommon too. They've usually ironed that out because it's so expensive. You don't really go and shoot multiple endings. But could there be different variations of what we saw? I think that's always entirely possible, and that gets cut into what Albert was saying, that you just you see what works best, but it doesn't necessarily change the script or change the screenplay or whatever you were working from as your basis. And I think generally you want to have a lot of that stuff worked out. You start to feel if that's going to work out, and you fix some of that before you get to that final set of scenes to where you want to do that. And did they consider a post-credit scene? I'd be interested to hear if they talk about it at all, because I don't know, because like you said, we just don't really do this. We keep hoping they'll kind of break the seal on that and maybe give us one at one point. I think this would have been a great series to have one.
Yeah, for sure.
To be honest with you, I thought I scrolled through because I was like, if there was going to be one, it kind of feels like this is a great spot for it, because I was just really curious what it would have been. So it would be interesting to hear from the creators if they even consider this, or if it's like, no, it's not on the table, so we don't really even think about it or talk about it, which is probably my guess as to where things go. Is like, no, we don't really do that. So tell everything you need to tell within the story, and we're kind of done with it.
Yeah, and Julian did ask, just to go back to the other first part of his question about he said, or like a statement, he said the ending seemed kind of abrupt. I would agree. Like it did feel like it was just suddenly done and over.
Yeah.
Now, that said, it still felt satisfying, and it felt like we got all the answers that we needed to get. But I would agree, there was a lot that was just wrapped up and we got to go, right? Show's over, head home kind of thing. But I don't know if that was really a bad thing. I know I've seen a lot of feedback. I've seen a lot of people post like, "Hey, loved the show, loved everything about it, but I really wish I would have gotten more of insert some open thread that they were hoping to hear, or the fact that it was only 40 minutes and they felt like this one should have been 50 because they could have tied up some of these loose ends, like some of the minor things that we've been talking about here."
Yeah, but
So I think it's fair. I think it's fair.
I think it's fair. I think we felt it, right? And I definitely did as well. But I think on some level, though, also the reason why we think this episode worked so well is because it was very efficient with what it was doing, and it kept moving, and it didn't really waste time, and it didn't slow itself down and drag it anywhere. And I would have been disappointed if the very, very end felt dragged out just to start checking boxes to, to close some of these gaps. And when leaving them open, I don't think did a disservice to anything and didn't really hurt the story. It didn't, like, some of the things that got left open with Acolyte felt a little more raw to me than what we had here, what was left open. There were some big questions still left open in Skeleton Crew, make no mistake.
Yeah.
But they're also like, okay, well, but we really did close the core story quite satisfactorily here too. And they hadn't done that, then I think that's where Acolyte struggled a little bit, is that did we really get good closure? We got closure, but was it kind of, did it feel satisfying? And I think on some levels, maybe not. And Skeleton Crew felt like, no, we actually wrapped that up pretty well. We feel good where the characters left. We don't know what's going on with Jod. That's a good question for us to kind of contemplate and think, and open the door for, possibilities in the future, but not necessarily needing to see him be arrested or thrown in the brig or whatever, right? Or have all the pirates collected, or have Kim, or Leia or someone show up and say, what's the plan for At Attin, right? Or start talking about tech. I mean, we'll talk about this Sunday, but, of all the things that we had out there, what are the things, maybe the question back to folks asking this question is, what things would you have liked to have seen wrapped up that maybe would have felt more complete, and maybe why does that help it make it feel more complete within the story and not slow it down? So I think that's just the one thing, is the pace that we got just felt so good for this episode. So I think anything that we would have been doing maybe would have felt a little bit forced.
Yeah. No, great answer. I co-sign all of it as well. So, all right.
So winner for the poster this week is John Maloney. So congratulations, John. We'll reply back to your email, and we will ask for your address. And if you're comfortable giving that to us, we will get the poster mailed out very, very soon.
Yeah, well, you better be real comfortable, or it's going to go to somebody else.
Yeah, Drew, I mean, you did send us an email, so we anticipate you really want it. We love all the responses. Hey, yeah, thanks everyone for all of the great questions, and really strong showing this week. This was a lot of fun. So Albert, before we go, overall, as a series, out of 10, we don't rank things, but we're going to rank it. So out of 10, where does this rank for you out of 10 on a scale of 10 for the series as a whole?
I said this in Discord last night, and I was on an emotional high, but I don't think I've come down from that. So I think I'm saying 9. I rank this right behind Andor. It could easily vie for a second place for me, but it's hard for me to let go of Ahsoka, because that is, the continuation of Rebels. So I'm still going Andor, Ahsoka, and then this series, but it's right up there for me. I thought, like, and it's all the Amblin vibes. It's everything I wanted. This is my freaking childhood on display, and getting to watch this with my own kids and seeing their expressions. A lot of that is coming, is kind of inflating probably the number for me, but I can't tell you how many times my kids ask me throughout the week, is it Tuesday yet? Is it Tuesday yet? I mean, they were waiting at 8 p.m. to watch the finale, and that has never happened with anything I've done with Star Wars. So they were all in on this show. And so for that reason, it's a 9.
Yeah, one of Versus CPU says this is third after Mando and Ahsoka for him. Yeah, and as we're talking and wrapping up, if people want to put just kind of what out of 10, what would you give it? I think in Discord I put 7.5. I'm going to bubble that up to an 8. I think this was really, I think it was pretty solid all season long. I think it did a lot of things good. There was a lot of belief that had to be suspended, but when I took a step back and viewed it as more of kind of an all ages family type of thing, I felt a lot better about the series, and I kind of let go of some things and just kind of leaned into it a little bit more and felt like it was just a lot of fun. And so I felt like an 8 was really, I think that's a fantastic score. Chris is giving it an 8.5. Kids also loved it and looked forward to Tuesdays as well, just like Howard. So I think 8, even 8.5, I think when you start to get in that number, anywhere between a 7.5 and 8.5, I think is a really great score for this series. And I think it's a testament to the kids. I mean, the kids and Jude Law, of course, just you can't say enough about it, but the kids really delivered on the show. A lot of this really hinged on their performance being, believable. It's really tough to know what to expect from child actors. Some are fantastic, and other ones are still developing their craft, right? And is it consistent? Sometimes they're really good, but is it consistent? I think these four in particular, man, they just knocked it out of the park, and they really, I think, did a great job of carrying the show and somehow really acting like they all knew each other. I mean, it was just the chemistry was unreal. So it was fantastic.
No, we got solid performances from everybody in the series, which always helps. Dante says 9 for what it was trying to do, maybe lower as a personal score, but that's okay. Alex says he gives us an 8 out of 10. So it's on the higher level. I think the only bummer is the viewership, right? It's not getting the viewerships that you would think it's getting. And lower than the Acolyte, lower than some of the other series. And so that doesn't bode well for a season 2. And that's why I said, like, it kind of sucks, but make no mistake about it. Like, this was an impressionable series, and there are going to be people that, kids, my kids as a testimony, they're going to come out of this and go like, those are the characters I grew up with. This is, how did you get into Star Wars? Well, my dad liked Star Wars and that sort of thing, but it wasn't until Skeleton Crew that I really just kind of like, wow, I really want that part of it. I loved everything about it, kind of thing. And that probably won't manifest. We won't see that actually come to fruition anytime soon. It might be years from now, but make no mistake, it has left an impression on a number of kids. And I think it will hold up over time, similar to the way the Goonies did. Like, when that movie came out, it wasn't a blockbuster, and the kids loved it. Adults looked at it as like, oh yeah, it's kind of fun and cheesy and that sort of thing. And now it's, we look at it as this gem of film, which it truly is. So, but anyways, yeah, he says it was a 9, but no Hondo or Ruck. Yeah, that's Alex.
Well, I think the other thing with the viewership, I think we talked about this, I think, in maybe Final Hype. I didn't expect this show to be a huge hit in the traditional sense. I think where we need to maybe see if we get any information from it, it's really difficult because people don't report on this stuff over time. Everything's a right now kind of society of how did it perform this week? How did it trend against other ones? I'm curious if a show like this has legs, though, right? And when we see this with some movies during the holidays, it's not necessarily about did they want to capture that first couple of weekends because there's a lot of money there. But where you can really make a lot of money is if you have staying power and you draw an audience for over time. So this is a show that I think for people, if word of mouth is still a thing, this is a show where I think, and I was saying this to people at work this week too, after this episode, I was like, I think you'll like it. Like, hey, I kind of I'm interested in, maybe I watched the first 2 episodes. There was a few different stories. I'm like, oh, I think you should go do it. I think this is a great all ages show. If your family is even kind of interested in Star Wars, just looking for something, and it's genuinely kind of wholesome. It's not as violent as some of the other things, but it still has that tension and everything. I think this is a great series for you, especially if your kids are, maybe 12 and younger. I think is a good one. And if your kids are older and like Star Wars, then give it a shot. But I'm curious if this one has some legs. I'd like to see. I'm hoping that it draws viewerships for a longer time, even if it's maybe not a top 10 show or maybe it's only flirting with top 10. But it's going to have some steep competition. I mean, things like Daredevil are coming out in March. I mean, there's other series coming out soon too. So there's always more competition. So we're a bit of a right here in front of a society. But I'm hoping that we will see it have continued success over time, and it's not just written off right away.
Forgotten. Yeah.
And again, I mean, those are the things that hopefully the executives are looking at. Is it going to drive some of the numbers? We'll see, but
Well, the more money executives put in, the more willing Disney's to front whatever the cost is, the delta. So I don't know if you saw, there's 1 billion executives on this one, like more than we've seen in some of the other series, and I don't know how much they contributed, but the more people are willing to put their own money in, that's less for Disney, less of a risk for them to renew.
It's all about return, though, right? So
yeah, it's all about return.
Put your money in, but you got to expect a return, and they want these returns to be rather high these days. So it's the world we live in, right? When you have expensive content, you got to be willing to keep wanting to do it. So it's an interesting time for us, what's cool is that we got it right. We got a show like this, and it was fun. It was exciting. A lot of recollection for folks like you, even people who haven't seen Goonies like me. I promise I will watch it at some point.
Sorry, excuse me.
You told me you were going to invite me over and we'd watch it together. That way you could just.
I'm not doing anything this weekend. Come on. Come on
It's
over.
this weekend. So I'm sorry. I gotta have a meeting.
Yeah, I've got to wash my hair. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Wash my, yeah, that's actually a good excuse. Yeah, it takes a while, but I'm glad though it did resonate with so many people, and it was enjoyable, and it really nothing totally wrong with it, which is really great. Whenever you could say, well, no one's really harping on this thing for all the wrong reasons. So if they are, they're just a stick in the mud. Mike Rondo.
Yeah. You know who are not stick in the muds?
I love your segues. There are amazing people in the live stream tonight. We had a ton of people out here. Thank you so much for coming out. Everyone that said hi and interacted with us, we appreciate it. If you didn't this time, we would love for you to do it next time. But special thanks to Steph, Music Train, Sky, Alex, One Up versus CPU, Matthew, Gary Smith, Zorallins, Dante, Humphrey Bear, Chris Jovanovich, Jorge Castro, Michael Draco, my Star Wars guys, Trent. If I missed anyone, my sincerest apologies. It was not intentional. CantinaCast.com/YouTube. If you are listening to this and you'd like to come out and join the live stream, join the interaction with others, tell us what is on your mind. We would love it. Also, if you're watching this afterwards over on YouTube, please do like it, leave us a comment. Let us know what your rating for Skeleton Crew was out of 10. We'd love to hear it. Any special moments, if there were any highlights. And again, this Sunday, we are actually, we had a Patreon. We're doing top 3 moments this week for Patreon, aren't we? Or are we going to move that to next week?
Oh, was that? Okay. Yeah, it's the 19th. Sorry. This week, I misread that. So this weekend, we'll be doing our top 3 moments of Skeleton Crew. That'll be with some Patreon members. If you're a Patreon member, please reach out to us and you can sign up. Come join us on the show. That'll be a lot of fun. And then the following week, we'll kind of come back and wrap everything up on Patreon with all the unanswered questions and talk about the future and all of that as well. So CantinaCast.com/Patreon to sign up.
Yeah. Shout out to Jenny Wataro. She just jumped in the chat. So good to see you. We
thank
hope you enjoy the episode.
Yeah. And then also, lastly, I forgot to plug, we've got a new Jedi novel archive. So Lauren has just released the Tears of the Nameless breakdown. So that is one of the High Republic books as part of phase 2.
People have loved
phase
this
3
book,
2,
by the way.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Phase 3.
people have loved this book. So
yeah, it's great. It's absolutely phenomenal. So go check it out. It's George Mann. He's again just another great writer that they've brought in and has just, hit the ground running, quite honestly, to coin a very common phrase there. But it's a great book breakdown. But check her video out on that one. And then we've also got a couple other ones coming out. There's some novels they finally released, and we're getting ready to release those as well. So all that's still coming. But head out to CantinaCast.com/YouTube and Patreon to sign up for all that additional content. We'll be back this week at some point as well. Next week we'll come back and do our weekly shows. Not sure if I think we're sticking to Wednesdays for now. So I know we typically do them on Thursdays, but we'll be back on a Wednesday to kind of pick up the reins there. So again, all this conversation about Skeleton Crew will be continued this weekend and next weekend. So we'll pick it up there. Jonesy, before we get out of here, any final words, anything else?
No, let's go take assessment, man.
All right. Assessment time. We'll see you guys here on Sunday.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.